Every time you felt bad for Meg, Griffin explained. Meg Griffin's suffering throughout Family Guy has reached legendary status. If there's any animated character who desperately needs a lifetime of therapy, it's definitely her. This girl has endured unimaginable treatment, so much so that even her voice actor practically begged the writers to give her at least one victory. As she put it years into the show, just give her something. Every time you think her situation can't get any worse, it somehow does. So here's our breakdown. Every single moment that made you genuinely feel sorry for Meg Griffin, explained. Episode analysis. Brian sings and swings, the fake lesbian arc explained. In this episode, we see Meg meeting Sarah, the first girl who shows her genuine kindness. This seems like Meg's breakthrough moment for forming her first real friendship. As Sarah invites her to join their after-school club, it appears to be the perfect bonding opportunity, but there's one significant problem. The club is actually the lesbian alliance. The heartbreaking reality here is that Meg's self-esteem issues and desperate need for acceptance run so deep that she joins anyway. She fabricates an entire lesbian identity just because these girls treat her with basic human kindness. To fully commit to this deception, she begins dating Sarah and even comes out to her parents. While Lois recognizes this as a complete facade, she fails to understand the profound reasons driving Meg's desperate behavior. Meg remains determined to maintain her fake lesbian identity just to preserve her friendship. Lois even goes as far as kissing Sarah directly in front of Meg to prove her point. The fact that Meg sits there and witnesses this scene is devastating. Eventually, Meg confesses everything to Sarah and apologizes, resolving the situation. However, the lengths she went to just to experience acceptance from others is genuinely tragic. Episode, Don't Make Me Over. The store attendant fire incident explained.
Today that all you see is violence in movies and sex on TV.
But this pales in comparison to having a sales attendant literally set herself on fire just to avoid looking at you due to perceived ugliness. Yes, this actually happened. In Don't Make Me Over, Meg faces pressure from her friends to ask out the school's most popular guy, Craig Hoffman. According to them, she's the only one with real relationship experience, though her previous boyfriend was practically deceased. Meg gathers her courage and asks Craig out, but faces rejection. While rejection isn't unusual for her, it still causes significant pain. When she turns to her family for support, even Stewie seizes the opportunity to mock her suffering. Lois attempts to cheer her up with a mall shopping trip for new dresses, but even this backfires spectacularly. The moment Meg exits the changing room, the store attendant has an extreme negative reaction, and of course Lois can't even salvage the situation. The attendant's reaction is so severe that she can't even form a proper excuse to spare Meg's feelings. Her appearance is completely transformed. Suddenly, she's conventionally attractive and instantly gains popularity. Meanwhile, Peter and his friends form a rock band that predictably fails. When the crowd becomes hostile, Lois brings the entire family on stage, and Meg's new appearance immediately captivates the audience. This leads to the family forming a music group with Meg as the centerpiece. However, their producer, Dr. Diddy, decides to exploit Meg in disturbing ways. Fame corrupts her, causing concern among the family. When they travel to New York for a Saturday Night Live performance, Meg believes she's achieved success. She even meets Jimmy Fallon and thinks he's genuinely interested in her. But then comes the devastating reveal. The entire interaction was a televised sketch designed to humiliate her nationally. Her facial expression in that moment is absolutely heartbreaking. Even when she achieves mainstream beauty and popularity, she still faces mistreatment. It's genuinely tragic to watch her struggle with feeling ugly her entire life, only to discover that changing her appearance doesn't actually change how others treat her. The situation becomes exponentially worse when Chris gains popularity. Meg isn't just ignored, she becomes a target for active cruelty. In steroids, Chris becomes popular after the attractive girl at school decides to experiment with dating unpopular guys. Since Meg has always wanted friendship with Connie, she hopes that dating Chris might create opportunities for them to spend time together. Connie's treatment of her is harsh, but Chris proves equally cruel.
Handle this. I'm sorry, Meg, you can't come. There's an ass to boob ratio that you're way off of.
Imagine being excluded from a party in your own home. She retreats upstairs in tears, and when Lois comes to console her after minimal effort, she makes a disturbing suggestion. How can an entire family be so systematically against one member? Eventually, Chris dumps Connie with characteristic callousness, and Connie approaches Meg for help and revenge. To add literal injury to insult, Chris throws a javelin directly at Meg. From dodging javelins, Meg next faces a school bully situation that leads to Quagmire teaching her a deeply disturbing self-defense method. The episode title, A Fistful of Meg, becomes tragically appropriate. Meg's friends warn her about Mike, a dangerous new student. Meg accidentally spills food on him, which apparently constitutes a major offense because Mike challenges her to fight on Friday. Meg panics completely, knowing Mike would easily overpower her. She desperately considers transferring schools or getting expelled through any means necessary. This plan fails because nobody shows interest in her video. She hires jocks for protection, but Mike defeats them and sends her a threatening message. This terrifies her so completely that she retreats to the restroom to cry. This is where Quagmire, mysteriously present in the girls' restroom, offers to help her defeat Mike. I'm deliberately avoiding questioning how or why Quagmire is even there. Quagmire's training involves channeling her rage toward Peter and weaponizing her own perceived physical shortcomings against Mike. The actual fight is disturbing to watch. Mike beats Meg severely, even managing to punch her ugly again after briefly making her attractive through violence. This girl truly cannot catch a break. Eventually, Meg remembers Quagmire's lessons and wins by disgusting the bully. The scene is deeply uncomfortable and ends with her somehow vaporizing Mike. While this might seem like victory, it's actually profoundly sad and goes against any message of body positivity. But if that sequence was disturbing, the family ganging up to spit on her takes the cruelty to unprecedented levels. Incredibly, the same episode delivers even worse treatment in the Griffin family history. When the Griffins hear suspicious noises at night, Peter investigates with a baton and discovers robbers in their home. Meg wakes up and seeks information about the situation, but staying in bed would have been preferable. Peter's reaction is unreasonably harsh, but he leads the family into a panic room he constructed and locks them inside. However, there's no phone inside for calling police. The family faces the same problem with food supplies. Their solution? Brian suggests that since Meg can fit through the ventilation system, she should sneak out for help. For someone supposedly being the voice of reason, why would Brian think it makes sense to send a defenseless girl into a house containing armed and dangerous men just to make sandwiches? To make matters worse, Peter suggests lubricating her for easier passage through the vents. This treatment is absolutely appalling. Why must they treat her this way? Meg makes her way to the kitchen, but Peter compounds his foolishness by using the intercom to reveal Meg's location to the robbers. She's captured, and when they write a ransom note, they make another error. Can Meg never catch a break in any episode? The situation reaches peak disturbing territory when the robbers are preparing to leave, and Meg makes a shocking suggestion. As horrifying as Meg's suggestion is when she pursues this course of action, the robber becomes traumatized instead. This entire sequence is deeply concerning. Ultimately, Meg faces sexual harassment charges. But if she only received harassment charges here, her next storyline involves actual imprisonment and a complete personality transformation. Every scene generates sympathy for her. Episode Dial Meg for Murder, her prison arc analysis explained. In Dial Meg for Murder, the episode opens with a rodeo contest announcement. Peter immediately appears in cowboy attire, and somehow Meg still suffers consequences. Brian and Stewie make a shocking discovery during their research. This relationship has been ongoing, and her boyfriend Luke sees no possibility of leaving prison. Meg commits to waiting for him indefinitely. When Brian reveals this information, Lois immediately shuts it down, devastating Meg. But her heartbreak doesn't last long. Not exactly. Love apparently motivates prison breaks. However, this freedom is short-lived because Joe recaptures Luke, sending him back to prison. Yet, Meg is also arrested for harboring an escaped convict. She initially doesn't understand the implications of imprisonment, but months later, Meg returns from prison completely transformed. Prison life has hardened her completely. She's covered in tattoos, aggressive, and mean. She begins dispensing the same treatment she endured her entire life, putting Peter in his place by knocking out his teeth and defeating Connie and her school bullies. Everyone fears her presence. Eventually, Meg acquires a gun and attempts to rob Mort Goldman, but Brian intervenes, pleading with her to stop because this isn't her true character. The article he wrote about her becomes the turning point as she reads Brian describing her in ways nobody ever had before, which completely breaks down her defenses. This reveals the depth of her abuse. All that toughness and anger was merely covering a lifetime of mistreatment. When you truly consider this, it generates genuine sadness for her character. But there are still more reasons to feel sorry for Meg. Episode Not All Dogs Go to Heaven, the Chris Crush revelation explained. The awkwardness and humiliation are devastating. In Not All Dogs Go to Heaven, The Griffins attend a convention where Peter characteristically forces Meg to photograph with someone in full body paint for novelty purposes. However, that's not paint. The person has MS. Since Peter never vaccinated Meg as a child, she contracts the disease. Meg becomes bedridden, her body swelling in agony. Her family's response? Absolutely nothing helpful. Lois attempts minimal comfort while Peter maintains distance out of fear. This exemplifies their typical parenting approach. Stewie joins in mocking her pain rather than offering assistance. Alone, suffering, and confined to bed, Meg finds her only comfort through a religious channel where Kirk Cameron addresses her directly. This minimal encouragement convinces Meg to embrace religious faith. Unfortunately, her circumstances don't improve as she continues receiving worse treatment in subsequent episodes. In Friends Without Benefits, Meg develops intense feelings for the new student Kent, but fears approaching him due to his popularity and her low self-esteem. Her friends grow tired of her constant obsession. She finally gathers courage, encouraged by Lois, to ask Kent out. However, Lois's encouragement is problematic. More supportive phrasing could have achieved the same goal. Meg calls Kent and asks him out. Surprisingly, Kent accepts. They attend movies together, and Meg feels overjoyed, unable to believe her fortune. Later, when she attempts to kiss him, she faces rejection in the most awkward way possible. The revelation gets worse. He's gay and prefers Chris. There's a unique kind of devastation when your crush reveals preference for your brother over you. This sends Meg into prolonged weeping, with everyone avoiding her during her emotional breakdown. While we should feel sympathy for her, the scene is admittedly somewhat humorous. Meg eventually confides in Brian, and by conversation's end, she's determined to convert Kent to heterosexuality. This plan is destined for failure, and within a day, Meg makes everything significantly worse. Her friends attempt to console her, but when they suggest Kent genuinely loves Chris, she conceives the idea of facilitating a sexual encounter between Kent and Chris. Her reasoning? She wants Kent to describe the experience to her for vicarious closure of her fantasies. This level of obsession is deeply disturbing. Chris naturally refuses, but she won't accept rejection. She approaches Quagmire for drugs to incapacitate Chris, then tells Kent the encounter with Chris is arranged, with Chris being unconscious. Regardless of family relationships, this behavior should result in imprisonment. Something is fundamentally broken within Meg to make her descend to such depths. Even when she secures a normal boyfriend, circumstances still don't favor her. In Go Stewie Go, Meg actually lands a boyfriend for once. Not just any boyfriend, but a genuinely attractive, charming individual, the type who doesn't recoil at her sight or file restraining orders before their second conversation. This alone stuns the entire town. People are genuinely amazed. He appears completely normal, and just as Meg begins believing the universe might stop treating her like a cosmic joke, Lois interferes. Feeling insecure about her age and viewing Meg's boyfriend as an ego boost, Lois becomes problematic. Seriously, Lois, that man is dating your daughter, not applying for a therapy position. But Lois absorbs every compliment like cosmetic enhancement for the soul. The situation deteriorates when Lois begins having inappropriate thoughts. She progresses from inappropriate thoughts to inappropriate actions. Meg unknowingly gets expelled from her own home, so Lois can pursue her boyfriend. No hesitation, no shame. Just complete betrayal. The worst aspect? She receives no apology from either Lois or Anthony. Just another chapter in the tragic comedy that defines Meg Griffin's romantic life. Episode Hard-Boiled Meg. The imaginary boyfriend situation explained. You cannot fault her for subsequently creating an entirely fictional boyfriend in Hard-Boiled Meg. Meg faces extreme boredom, and worse, nobody wants to accompany her while she hustles pool. Bruce, unable to watch her embarrass herself further, advises her to return home. That's when Meg receives a request from an unusually attractive man asking for transportation home. This should have been immediately suspicious because her luck isn't favorable enough to attract such an appealing man. And this point is proven when Seymour's next action involves having her drive to a convenience store while he commits robbery. Seymour robs the store with Meg serving as getaway driver. Perhaps the thrill was exciting, but it's time to discontinue this association and avoid this man. Instead, they repeat the crime the following night and plan to target a major department store. Chris overhears their plot and sensibly attempts to dissuade her. She ignores his advice. Meg and Seymour are too committed now. They execute the heist and escape, but Meg's awareness slowly returns as she questions whether Seymour is exploiting her. Obviously, he's exploiting her, but when Seymour claims to love her, Meg becomes completely lost upon hearing those words. Their Bonnie and Clyde relationship is interrupted by police intervention. Meg panics, accelerates to escape, but reality crashes down when they collide with Peter driving Quagmire's car. The most shocking revelation? Chris discovers that the entire situation existed only in Meg's imagination. How lonely must someone be to completely fabricate a gangster boyfriend just to experience some excitement in life? This borders on mental illness and indicates urgent need for therapeutic intervention. While that situation was both wild and sad, the episode that truly revealed Meg's need for therapy to overcome internalized abuse was when she accepted her role as the family's emotional punching bag because, in her flawed logic, it kept the family united. In Seahorse Seashell Party, a hurricane disables the television, leaving the Griffins trapped indoors. Due to boredom, they attempt playing games. When Meg wants to participate, they turn against her. Meg endures this treatment as boredom intensifies. Next, Peter attempts humming the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade theme and targets Meg for no reason, as usual. But this time, Meg refuses to accept it passively. I felt proud of her for taking a firm stance and confronting them. It felt relieving that after years of abuse, she was finally speaking up. She didn't stop there, deciding to address all their flaws individually, beginning with Chris. She also confronts Lois for failing as her mother. What truly breaks Lois is when Meg says, "The entire speech was already heartbreaking, and this was a devastating addition." But Meg isn't finished. When Peter attempts interrupting with humor, Meg addresses his faults as potentially the worst of all. There was immense emotional pain here, and for someone whose abuse had been played for cheap laughs for so long, this represented a more serious tone that genuinely evokes sympathy for Meg. After her criticisms, not one family member apologizes to her. Instead, they all turn on each other, arguing and fragmenting. This is when Meg observes the chaos and reaches the depressing conclusion that she serves a purpose, acting as the family lightning rod for their frustrations. Worst of all, she's the one who apologizes. This is so tragic that words fail me, just like the silence that followed when Stewie launched her into space. This exemplifies profound silence. Lois being unfaithful to Peter Griffin, Meg faces constant dismissal, with her opinions treated as worthless. But if you think watching Meg endure all this represents the most extreme situation, you should check out this video talking about Lois being unfaithful to Peter Griffin.